Amina had walked a long way from her office that evening, tired from the day's work and wishing she could just go straight to her room and rest. The streets had been busy, filled with cars honking, people rushing to get home, and the smell of fried food drifting from small stalls. She had held her bag tightly in one hand and tried to ignore the buzzing notifications on her phone, just wanting to focus on the thought of sitting down and relaxing. She finally reached the small house she shared with her family, and even from the gate she noticed something unusual. The lights in the living room were on, and there were boxes scattered around, some open and some closed, with what looked like plant leaves peeking from a few of them. She frowned slightly, wondering why her father, Musa, would leave such a mess for her to walk into. Normally he liked to keep things neat, even if he was busy with his own small projects. But tonight there was an unusual energy in the air. The smell of damp soil and fresh leaves came through the open door, making her curious and slightly confused. She opened the door slowly and stepped inside, dragging her tired feet across the smooth floor. "Mama?" she called, thinking her mother might be there to explain the strange scene. But the only voices she heard were her father's soft humming and a faint rustling from the boxes. Then Musa appeared from behind a large box, his face bright and eyes wide with excitement. "Amina, you're home," he said, sounding unusually cheerful. His usual calm voice was replaced with a tone of urgency, almost like he had been waiting for her for hours. Amina smiled weakly, feeling a mix of exhaustion and curiosity. "Yes, Baba. I'm home." "What's all this?" she asked, gesturing to the boxes and plants that filled the living room. Musa's smile widened. You will see soon," he said, waving his hands like it was a magical secret. "Wait and see." Amina tilted her head and looked around. There were little stacks of pots, some gardening tools, and a few small lights tangled together on the floor. The faint sound of running water could be heard from one corner, and she realized that something in the corner was trickling softly. "Is that water?" she asked, her curiosity growing despite her tiredness. Musa chuckled and shook his head, hiding a little secret behind his back. "Patience, my child. Patience," he said, though she could see his eyes glinting with mischief. From the corner her younger brother, Sudi, ran out and nearly bumped into her legs. "Amina, Baba is doing something amazing," he whispered excitedly, his eyes wide and his small hands gesturing toward the boxes. "I think it's a big surprise." Amina bent down and ruffled his hair gently. "You're just as excited as Baba, I see," she said, smiling softly. She looked at him, noticing how his little grin seemed full of anticipation. She could tell he had been watching their father all evening, trying to guess what was happening, and that made her even more curious. She walked slowly into the living room, careful not to step on the scattered tools or boxes. She could see Musa moving around quickly, carrying pots from one side to the other, arranging something she couldn't yet make out. Each time she tried to peek at what he was doing, he would spin around with a big grin and block her view. "No peeking, Amina. All will be revealed soon," he said, chuckling. "You must wait or the surprise will lose its magic." Amina paused, crossing her arms, feeling a mix of impatience and amusement. She could see the sweat on her father's forehead, the way his hands moved quickly, and the way he hummed a cheerful tune under his breath. Even in his old clothes, a simple shirt and worn trousers, there was a lively energy about him that made her smile. She realized she had not seen him like this in a long time, so focused, so excited, and so full of life. Normally he was quiet in the evenings, reading the newspaper or sitting with a cup of tea, but tonight he was like a young man planning an adventure. "Baba, what are you planning?" she asked again, unable to hide her curiosity. Musa stopped for a moment, turned to her with a mysterious smile and said, "All will be clear soon. Just wait." He picked up a small pot and placed it carefully on a low shelf he had already set up. The pot contained some soil and a small green plant that peeked from the top. "It's part of the surprise," he said, winking at Sudi, who clapped his hands quietly in excitement. Amina walked closer, trying to get a better look without disturbing the setup. The little green leaves were shiny and fresh, and she could smell the damp earth. It was unusual for Musa to be so interested in plants. She had always known he liked a few flowers in the yard, but this looked like a much bigger project. The water sound grew louder as she approached the corner, and she realized that he had set up a small fountain. Tiny streams of water trickled into a miniature basin, creating a soft, calming sound that made the room feel alive. Sudi ran to her side. "Baba said we should not touch anything yet," he whispered, bouncing on his toes. "But isn't it amazing? I've never seen him this excited before." Amina knelt down to his level and smiled. "Yes, it is amazing," she said, feeling a strange warmth inside her chest. She had been so focused on work and stress that she rarely noticed these small family moments. Now, seeing her father so full of life and joy, she felt a little thrill of happiness and anticipation. Musa clapped his hands and called out, "Now let's make some room. You must see the full surprise." He moved quickly, gesturing to Amina and Sadi to stand aside. They watched as he arranged the boxes carefully, moving some small plants and arranging the lights in a pattern. The air was filled with the smell of fresh soil, leaves and something faintly sweet, maybe a flower or a small fruit plant. Amina could feel her excitement growing, wondering what the final reveal would be. She took a deep breath, trying to imagine all the possibilities. Could it be a small indoor garden? Or maybe a surprise dinner? But as she looked at the little plants and the arrangement of boxes, she realized it must be something unusual, something she had never expected from her quiet, gentle father. Musa's smile, wide and bright, gave her hope that whatever it was, it came from the heart. Sadi tugged her sleeve. "Hurry, Amina. He's almost done," he whispered. Amina laughed softly. All right. Let's see," she said, moving closer, careful not to touch anything yet. She watched Musa as he carried the last pot, carefully placing it next to the others. He adjusted a small wooden sign, wrote something on it and stepped back to admire his work. Amina's curiosity was at its peak. She could feel her heart beat faster, mixing with the tiredness of the day. But all her stress seemed to fade as she watched her father's joy and the careful way he had worked. Sadi bounced beside her, whispering, "It's going to be amazing, I know it." Amina smiled, feeling the same excitement. Musa turned to them, eyes sparkling. "Now, my children, the wait is over. You may see the surprise." He gestured for Amina and Sadi to step closer. She looked at him, her curiosity overwhelming, and felt a strange thrill run through her. What could her father have done? The room smelled fresh, it felt alive, and something about the way Musa stood proudly made her heart warm. She realized that whatever the surprise was, it was more than just an object or a decoration. Amina watched quietly as Musa moved around the living room with unusual energy. Her father, usually calm and measured, seemed like a young boy full of excitement and ideas. He carried small clay pots, some with soil, some empty, while carefully balancing wooden shelves and soft string lights. The soft hum of his movements and the gentle rustling of leaves in the pots filled the room with a quiet sense of anticipation. Amina tried to peek over the edge of a large box, but Musa seemed to notice her every glance, turning just enough to block her view with his broad shoulders. "Patience, Amina. All will be revealed soon," he said, his voice cheerful but mysterious. His eyes sparkled as he adjusted a small shelf near the corner, carefully making sure it was level. Amina crossed her arms, trying not to frown at being blocked, but her curiosity only grew stronger. What could her father be planning? She had no idea. Sadi, her younger brother, ran around the room, barely able to contain his excitement. He giggled and whispered, "It's going to be amazing. You'll see, Amina. Baba worked so hard." His small hands waved at the pots and boxes as he tried to guess what was hidden beneath them. Amina knelt down to Sadi's level and ruffled his hair. "You really think it's amazing?" she asked softly. Sadi nodded eagerly. "Yes, I can feel it. Baba has a big surprise for us. I just know it." His eyes sparkled with excitement, and his energy made Amina smile despite her tiredness from work. She realized her little brother had been watching their father all evening, probably trying to figure out what was happening, and now he was bubbling over with anticipation. Musa carried a small pot to the corner of the room, where a soft sound of trickling water could be heard. Amina tilted her head, curious. Could it be a fountain? She had never seen her father do anything like this before. Her imagination ran wild, imagining tiny gardens, little indoor streams, or maybe even a hidden gift for each of them. Each thought made her heart beat faster with excitement. Her father moved with careful precision, adjusting the position of a tiny plant in a clay pot. The plant was small, with bright green leaves, and it seemed fragile in his hands. Musa placed it gently on the shelf he had just installed, then stepped back to admire it. He smiled, clearly pleased with his own work. Amina tried to get closer, hoping for a better look, but Sadi darted in front of her, bouncing on his toes, whispering, "No peeking. Baba said we can't see yet." Amina laughed softly. Sadi's excitement was contagious. She looked at her father again and saw the way he moved, careful, thoughtful, and full of pride. It was unusual for Musa to put so much energy into something so creative. Normally he was practical and quiet, focused on work or small repairs around the house. But tonight he seemed different. Full of life, full of joy, full of a secret he couldn't wait to reveal. She stepped back, letting her father work without interference. Musa picked up a small string of lights and adjusted them around the wooden shelves. Each bulb glowed softly, casting a warm light across the pots and small plants. The light reflected on Amina's face, making her eyes widen in curiosity. She tried to imagine what it would look like when the setup was finished. She pictured the shelves full of greenery, the little lights twinkling, maybe a tiny fountain bubbling somewhere, and a space that felt magical and peaceful. Sudhi tugged at her sleeve again. "I can't wait," he whispered, his voice barely containing his excitement. "Baba said it took him all week to set this up. Can you believe it?" Amina nodded, still watching her father carefully place another pot on the bottom shelf. He stepped back, examining the arrangement, then adjusted the plants slightly to the left. She could see the care he had put into every detail, the thoughtfulness behind every move. Musa picked up another pot, this one slightly larger, and carried it toward the center of the room. He placed it carefully on the floor, near what looked like a small basin. Amina's curiosity spiked. Could it be a water feature? She heard the soft trickle again, louder this time. The sound was soothing, unlike anything in their usual busy home. She realized that her father had thought not just about how it would look, but how it would feel. The soft sounds, the warm light, the smell of fresh soil. Every sense was involved in this surprise. Sudhi clapped his hands quietly. "It smells so nice. I can't wait to touch the plants," he whispered. Musa smiled at his son but shook his head. "Patience, Sudhi. We will all enjoy it together soon," he said. His voice was calm, full of excitement, but also teaching them to wait for the final reveal. Amina crouched a little, trying to get a better view without disturbing anything. She noticed the small wooden labels next to some of the pots. Each label had neat handwriting, though she couldn't yet read what was written on them. She wondered if they were names of plants, little messages, or something else. Musa caught her looking and winked. "All will be revealed," he said again, smiling. The soft smell of soil, leaves, and something floral filled the room. Amina closed her eyes for a moment and breathed in deeply. She felt calmer than she had all day. The noise of the outside world, the traffic, the crowds, the stress, seemed to fade away. Here, in this small room, with her father working and her brother bouncing around excitedly, she felt a sense of quiet anticipation she had not felt in months. Musa moved quickly now, carrying a few more small pots, arranging them with precision. Amina noticed the little details, the careful spacing, the gentle placement of each plant, the way he checked the level of each shelf. His hands were steady, his movements deliberate, yet there was a spark of joy in every action. It was clear he had poured his heart into this surprise. Sudhi ran to her side, tugging at her sleeve again. "Look. Baba is almost done. Can you see?" Amina leaned closer, trying not to disturb anything, but she still could not see the full arrangement. Musa was very careful, and every time she tried to peek, he moved just enough to hide the details. It made the anticipation grow even stronger. Musa carried a small watering can and sprinkled a little water into one of the pots. The soil looked fresh and damp, and the tiny plants seemed to perk up. He smiled at his work and then glanced at Amina and Sudhi. "Almost ready," he said, his voice full of pride. "Just a little longer and you will see." Amina's heart raced with excitement. She could sense that whatever the surprise was, it was something special. Not just a gift but a labor of love. She had seen her father fix small things around the house, but never create something like this, something meant to bring joy and calm to everyone. The mystery made her even more eager to discover the final result. Sudhi jumped up and down quietly. "I can't wait. It's going to be amazing," he whispered again. Amina smiled, feeling her own excitement grow. She realized she had been so focused on work and daily routines that she had forgotten how exciting it could be to wait for something joyful, to watch someone put love and care into a project for the family. Finally, Musa stepped back, looking around the room with satisfaction. He had placed the last pot, adjusted the last light, and made sure every shelf was perfectly aligned. Amina and Sudhi exchanged excited glances. Musa finally stepped back from the shelves and wiped his hands on his trousers. His smile spread slowly across his face, the kind of smile that came only when he felt proud and content. Amina stood near the doorway with Sudhi beside her, both waiting silently, their hearts full of excitement. The room was dim except for the warm glow of the small lights Musa had placed earlier. The soft sound of trickling water came from the corner, making the room feel calm and peaceful. Musa cleared his throat and said softly, "All right. You can come in now." Amina took a step forward, unsure of what she was about to see. Sudhi grabbed her hand and dragged her forward with a giggle. As soon as she stepped fully into the living room, her breath caught. It felt like the whole room had changed into another world, quiet, green and full of life. She gasped, her eyes wide with surprise. What she saw was far more beautiful than anything she had imagined. The tiny shelves Musa had been arranging were now covered with small green plants. Some plants had thick leaves, some had thin leaves that hung down gently, and some had flowers blooming in soft colors. The wooden shelves were arranged in neat rows, each holding pots of different shapes and sizes. The small lights Musa had hung cast a warm glow across each pot, making the leaves shine softly. In the center of the room, Amina saw a tiny fountain sitting inside a small stone basin. Water rose gently from the middle and fell quietly around the edges. The soft sound of the water made the room feel peaceful, like a quiet forest corner far away from the noise of the city. Sudhi let go of Amina's hand and ran ahead excitedly. "Look, Amina. Look at everything," he shouted with joy, though Musa gently reminded him to lower his voice. But no one could blame Sudhi for being excited. Even Amina could not stop her mouth from opening in surprise, her eyes moving from one plant to another. She looked around slowly, trying to take in every detail. On each pot, she saw a small wooden sign stuck neatly into the soil. She leaned close to one and read the name written in her father's careful handwriting. Peace Lily. Another pot said, Mint. Another said, Sun Baby, which made her smile because she knew Musa liked giving cute names to small plants. She turned to Musa, her eyes full of curiosity and emotion. Baba, you did all this? Musa nodded, his smile warm. Yes, he said softly. I made this for us to enjoy together. Amina felt her heart swell with warmth. She had expected something nice, but she had never expected this. A whole indoor garden made with so much love and patience. She walked deeper into the room, touching the leaves gently with her fingertips. The plants smelled fresh and the soil still looked new. She could tell her father had worked hard to make everything perfect. The more she walked around, the more she saw little details. Musa had painted the wooden shelves a soft brown color that matched the pots. He had placed small stones around the fountain to make it look natural. He even added a small wooden bench in the corner, big enough for 2 people to sit. Amina imagined sitting there with Musa and Sudhi, drinking tea and talking quietly while surrounded by the gentle glow of the lights and the calming sound of water. Sudhi ran from plant to plant, pointing at each one with excitement. This one has big leaves. This one smells nice. Baba, what is this one called? He asked. Musa walked to him and lifted him gently so he could see the label better. That one is rosemary, he explained. You can smell it. It has a strong scent. Sudhi bent down and sniffed the plant, then giggled. It smells funny, but nice. Musa laughed, patting his head. Amina watched them with soft eyes. She could see the joy on her father's face as he explained the plants. He looked younger, brighter, and full of life. She realized that this project must have meant a lot to him, not only because he enjoyed plants but because he wanted to create something beautiful for the family. She walked to the small bench and sat down, letting the peaceful atmosphere wrap around her. She could hardly believe this was the same living room she walked through every day. It felt like a tiny world of its own, full of light and calm. She noticed small round stones placed carefully around the base of the larger pots, and a soft woven mat under the bench. Every corner of the room had something thoughtful in it. Baba, Amina said softly, why did you decide to make this? Musa looked at her, his expression gentle. He walked over and sat on the edge of the bench beside her. I wanted a place where we can relax together, he said. A place that feels peaceful. A place where we can breathe. He looked around the room slowly, his eyes shining with pride. Life is busy. Work is hard. I wanted us to have a small space that brings us peace when we come home. Amina nodded slowly. She understood what he meant. She often came home tired, her mind full of worries. But here in this quiet room she felt all her stress melt away. The warm lights, the soft plants, the gentle water, all of it made her feel safe and calm. Sudhi jumped onto the bench between them, smiling widely. Baba, can we water the plants every day? He asked. Musa laughed softly. Yes, but gently. Plants like care, not too much water. Amina laughed too, watching Sudhi's excitement. She could already imagine her little brother waking up early every morning, excited to check on each plant. She could also imagine Musa sitting here with a cup of tea in the evenings, resting and enjoying the quiet. Amina looked around again and noticed something she had missed at first. On one of the shelves was a small wooden board with a message burned into it. She stood up and walked closer to read it. The message said, Home is where we grow together. Her heart warmed instantly. She looked back at Musa, who smiled shyly when he saw her reading the message. I wanted something special to remind us, Musa said quietly. Something simple but true. Amina touched the board gently. It was smooth and warm from the lights. She felt tears rise in her eyes, but she blinked them away and smiled instead. This is beautiful, Baba, she said. Truly beautiful. Musa nodded and his eyes softened. As long as it makes you happy, that is enough. Amina walked back to the bench and sat again, listening to the soft fountain sound. She felt calmer than she had in a long time. She looked at her father and brother, both smiling, both glowing in the gentle light of the room, and she felt gratitude fill her heart. Who would have guessed that one ordinary evening could turn into something so magical? Musa stood, stretched his back and laughed. Well, he said, this garden is for all of us. But Amina, you must promise to help take care of it too. Amina nodded with a big smile. I promise. The three of them stayed in the room for a long time, touching leaves, smelling herbs, listening to water and talking about which plants would grow faster. It felt like the start of something new, a new place, a new memory, a new kind of peace in their home. Amina slowly lifted her hand and touched the soft leaves of one of the plants. The leaf felt cool, smooth and alive beneath her fingers. She smiled without even meaning to. The gentle touch made her feel something warm in her chest, something peaceful that she had not felt in a long time. She looked around the room again, still amazed at how different everything looked. It felt like stepping into a quiet garden hidden inside their home, far away from noise, stress and worries. Sudhi, full of excitement, ran around the room pretending to water the plants. He held an empty cup and tilted it carefully over each pot, making soft, sounds with his mouth, imitating pouring water. Musa laughed softly and shook his head. Sudhi, you will drown them if you pour like that, he teased gently. But Sudhi only giggled louder and continued moving from pot to pot, acting as if he was the most important gardener in the world. Amina watched her little brother and felt her heart warm again. His joy filled the room like sunshine. His laughter echoed off the walls and mixed perfectly with the sound of the tiny fountain. Just then Halima, Amina and Sudhi's mother, walked into the room. She had been cooking in the kitchen and came in after hearing all the noise and laughter. As soon as she stepped inside, she froze. Her eyes widened as she took in the sight of the glowing shelves, the little fountain, and the small indoor garden Musa had created. For a moment she said nothing. Her mouth slowly opened, and her hand covered her chest as if her heart had suddenly become too full. Musa, she whispered softly, almost breathless. Musa turned to her with a shy smile. He almost looked like a young boy caught doing something surprising but good. Do you like it? He asked gently. Halima didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stepped forward, her eyes still wide, and wrapped her arms around Musa tightly. She pressed her cheek against his shoulder and held him as if she didn't want to let go. Oh Musa, she said, her voice shaking with emotion. This is beautiful. So beautiful. Musa laughed quietly and held her just as tightly. I wanted something peaceful for all of us, he said. Something that makes our home feel warm. Amina watched her parents with a soft smile. She loved seeing them happy. She loved watching them share a moment of love and gratitude. It made the room feel even warmer. Sudhi ran over and hugged both his parents around the waist, squeezing as hard as he could. Baba made a garden inside the house, he announced proudly, as if he had helped build all of it himself. Halima laughed and hugged him back. Yes, he did, she said, brushing his hair. And you, my little gardener, look very excited. Sudhi grinned, showing all his small teeth. I'm helping. I'm watering the plants, he said proudly, holding up his empty cup. Halima laughed again. Ah, but we must not flood the house, she teased softly. Amina walked toward her mother and hugged her too, feeling the warmth of her family gathered close. The soft glow of the lights made everything feel magical, like a warm dream she didn't want to wake from. After a long moment, they all pulled apart and began exploring the small indoor garden together. Halima bent down to smell one of the plants. This one smells lovely, she said. That's mint, Musa explained, smiling proudly. And this one? Halima asked, pointing to a plant with long thin leaves. Spider plant, Musa answered. Very good for clean air. Halima nodded with admiration. You really learned a lot for this, she said. Musa shrugged shyly. I watched many videos, he admitted. And I asked the shopkeeper many questions. Amina laughed softly. She imagined her father standing in a plant shop asking questions and taking notes. The thought was sweet and funny. They walked around the room, moving some pots slightly to the left or right, adjusting the shelves and making sure each plant had enough space. Every movement felt gentle and happy. They worked together without rush, talking softly and laughing every few minutes. Amina picked up one of the small wooden signs Musa had made. It felt smooth and light in her fingers. She read the name and then placed it gently back into the soil. "You wrote all of these?" she asked. Musa nodded. "Yes. I thought it would be helpful." "They look very nice," Amina said. Sadi stood on a small stool to reach the top shelf. "Baba, this plant looks lonely," he said dramatically, pointing at a small pot. Musa laughed. "Then we will move a friend next to it," he said. He lifted a pot with soft pink flowers and placed it beside the lonely plant. Sadi nodded proudly as if he had solved a great problem. Halima hugged him from behind and kissed his cheek. Amina walked to the small bench in the corner and sat down. She closed her eyes and listened to the soft sound of water from the tiny fountain. The gentle trickling sound made her feel calm, almost sleepy. She wondered how many evenings she would spend sitting here after long days at work. She imagined reading a book, sipping some tea, and watching the plants sway gently in the soft light. She opened her eyes and saw Musa watching her with a warm expression. "Do you like it, Amina?" he asked. "I love it, Baba," she said softly. "It feels like a place where I can rest." "That is exactly why I made it," Musa replied, his smile deepening. "A place where we all can rest." Halima touched the leaves of the rosemary plant and inhaled deeply. "This room smells so fresh," she said. "Even the air feels different." Musa nodded proudly. "Plants make good air," he said. "They help us breathe better." Sadi lifted his arms dramatically and took a huge breath. "I can feel it," he shouted. "I am breathing like a superhero." Everyone laughed, the sound warm and full of joy. They spent the next hour arranging the room together, moving pots, brushing soil from the shelves, and adjusting the lights. Sometimes they paused just to admire how peaceful everything looked. Other times they laughed loudly at something Sadi said. The room felt alive not only because of the plants, but because the family was together, sharing a moment they would never forget. After everything was arranged, Halima sat on the bench with Musa beside her. Amina sat on the floor, leaning against the bench, and Sadi crawled into her lap. They all stayed there quietly for a while, listening to the fountain, watching the lights glow softly, and feeling the peace Musa had brought into their home. Amina looked at her family, the people she loved most, and thought about how simple things could bring so much happiness. A few plants, some shelves, soft lights. But more than that, the love behind it. The care. The effort Musa had given because he wanted them to have a place of peace. The joy in the room was gentle but deep. It filled every corner, every breath, every smile. And in that moment, the little garden felt like the heart of their home. Amina sat quietly on the floor of the indoor garden, leaning her back against the wooden bench. The soft glow of the little lights made the plants look almost magical, as if each leaf carried a tiny light of its own. The gentle sound of the small fountain filled the room with a calming music that made everything feel slower and softer. For a long moment, she simply breathed in the fresh scent of the herbs and plants around her. Musa sat beside Halima on the bench. One of his hands rested gently on her lap, while the other held a small clay pot he had been adjusting earlier. His face still glowed with quiet pride. The surprise he had worked on for days was finally complete, and his family was gathered around him, peaceful and happy. Watching them made him feel something warm and deep inside. Sadi lay on the floor next to Amina, staring at the ceiling lights as if he were watching stars. Every now and then he reached out to touch a leaf or poke the soil softly with his finger. He hummed a small tune, a happy little sound that floated through the room like a whisper of joy. Amina looked at her father for a long moment. She watched the way his shoulders relaxed, the gentle smile on his face, the soft lines around his eyes that showed years of hard work and love. She realized something important, something simple yet powerful. Her father didn't create this garden because he wanted attention. He didn't do it for praise. He did it because he loved them. Because he wanted them to have peace. Because he wanted their home to feel warm and full of life. She felt a tightness in her chest, something like gratitude mixed with guilt. She remembered all the evenings she rushed past her father without talking much, too tired from work to notice him sitting quietly at the table. She remembered days when she didn't ask him how he was doing or if he needed help. She remembered mornings when she left in a hurry, barely saying goodbye. Now, seeing everything he had done for the family, she understood how much effort and time he had put into this surprise. He had worked silently, late at night and early in the morning, all to bring joy to the people he loved. And she had not even noticed. She felt her heart soften. "Baba," she said gently. Musa turned toward her, his eyes warm. "Yes, Amina?" She hesitated for a moment, choosing her words carefully. Thank you, she said softly. Not just for this, but for everything. I didn't realize how much you do for us. I didn't see it before. She placed her hand on the nearest pot, touching the cool clay. You worked so hard to make this garden. I want you to know that I really appreciate it. Musa's smile grew wider, but his eyes softened with emotion. He leaned forward slightly. My daughter, he said gently, you do not need to thank me. I did it because I love you all. Because family should have a place to rest. A place to breathe. Amina nodded slowly. I know. But still, I want you to know I understand now. She moved closer to him and sat at his feet like she used to do when she was younger. Musa placed a gentle hand on her head, stroking her hair the way he used to when she came home from school tired or upset. She closed her eyes, letting the simple gesture fill her with comfort. After a moment, Amina opened her eyes again. Baba, she said softly, I want to make a promise. Musa raised his eyebrows slightly, curious. A promise? Yes, she said with a small smile. I promise to spend more time with you. With Mama. With Sadi. I promise not to rush so much. I want to help you more. I want to be here with the family. Halima looked at her daughter with warm, shining eyes. Amina, she whispered, that means so much. Sadi suddenly sat up and clapped his hands. Yes, Amina will stay with us more. We can water the plants together, he shouted happily, bouncing excitedly. Amina laughed and pulled him into a hug. Yes, we will water them together, she said. Musa looked at his daughter with deep affection. Your promise is more precious than any gift, he said warmly. Time with family is the greatest treasure. Amina nodded. I see that now. The room fell into a peaceful silence again. But it wasn't an empty silence, it was warm and full, like a quiet moment shared between hearts that understood each other better than before. Halima placed her hand on Musa's shoulder. You have done something beautiful today, she said. This garden, it will bring us joy for many years. Musa shrugged shyly. It is simple, he said. No, Halima replied softly. It is perfect. Amina stood up and walked around the garden again. She ran her fingers over the leaves, feeling their soft texture. She bent down to smell one of the herbs, letting its fresh scent fill her lungs. She touched the small stone beside the fountain and listened to the gentle sound of water. Every detail spoke of love and care. She turned back toward her father and smiled. This garden feels like a place where hearts can rest. Musa nodded. That is exactly what I wanted. Sadi crawled onto the bench and sat between his parents, leaning his head against Musa's arm. Can we sit here every night? He asked. Musa laughed. If you wish. Amina took a seat beside the fountain and looked up at her father again. Baba, she said, you always think of us. You always give to us. From now on, I want to give back too. Musa sighed softly, but it was a happy sigh. All I want, he said, is for us to be together. That is enough. Amina nodded, her heart full. Then we will be together more, she promised. I won't take our time for granted again. The room felt even warmer now, filled not just with lights and plants, but with love, gratitude, and new understanding. The garden had become more than just a surprise. It had become a symbol of effort, of kindness, of family. Sadi yawned widely, his small body swaying. Halima smiled and kissed his forehead. I think our little gardener is tired, she said. Musa lifted Sadi gently and carried him toward the hallway. Tomorrow we will water the plants for real, he said. Sadi nodded sleepily. Yes, tomorrow? Amina followed them with her eyes, still smiling. She stood for a moment in the quiet room, letting the lights glow softly around her. She whispered to herself, this place will remind me every day to slow down, and to love more. She walked to the door, paused, and looked back once more at the little indoor garden. The fountain glowed softly, and the leaves moved gently in the warm air. It was perfect, and the promise she made felt true and strong in her heart.